Well, this is Gene Harm, and today I wanted to talk about setting up Elite Dangerous Odyssey for your VR. And just so you know, I just got Odyssey yesterday on July 8th, and here on July 9th, I wanted to get a YouTube out on setting up for VR while it was still fresh in my mind. Also, there was over the weeks a lot of other YouTubes on the topic of VR with a lot of misinformation, or maybe not so much misinformation, but information pertaining to earlier versions before the latest update. So I believe I must have update 5 come July 8th, and I don't have a lot of time to speak about that. I just want to speak about what to do and to set up for VR. Now, I will say that I'm going to go through all of the things that I think you should do if you've never used VR before in Elite Dangerous, you're new to Elite Dangerous in Odyssey, and you don't even know where to start to get a setup. I'm not going to go through and show you key bindings for every possible thing that you can do. It's overwhelming, and so I just want to show you the necessary key bindings for using Elite Dangerous Odyssey in VR to get you flying and walking on the ground, and yes, walking on the ground in VR. There's some difficulties with that. We'll talk about that later, but I'm going to go through it all. Now, if you are coming to this video specifically to look at how to set up VR for on foot and walking about, then I will post what time in the video you need to start looking at. But otherwise, we're going to go through all of the settings to get you going, just to get you going. And so, if you look on the screen now, you should see the time that we talk about the on-foot controls. But for the rest of us, let's go through all of the things. First off, you should have already set the controls to VR. Now, I am showing you in the regular monitor view because I don't want my head flying around and you having a trouble seeing the menus. So, but up here I would have custom, and but initially you will drop this down and set it to VR. Since I'm not in VR mode, that's not even available at the moment, but you want to set that to VR. So what that does is it will bind many of the things that you need for flying around to the controllers. I have an Oculus, but whether you have a Vive or one of the other VR headsets, it'll bind it to your controllers for many of the key things. A lot of them I just end up leaving alone, but I'm going to be doing once that's done, then I can go over here and do the custom build. So let's get right to it, because I'm starting to rant on here and speak about the first thing you want to do. And so once again, just so you know, I am not in the VR mode at the moment, so the key bindings you will see on screen are not the actual ones I have in VR, but I will go through the menu of what you need to do. So first things first, I'll come back to the main menu. I like how Odyssey had broke up the menu into these categories: general controls, ship controls, SRV controls, and on-foot controls. I like that. It's much easier than the previous where you had to go through all up and down the list and I got lost all the time. Particularly because you're going to be going up and down this list in VR, and so a long list like that, bobbing your head around is a little bit much. But so the first thing you're going to do once you've got it to the VR setting is go into the menu ship controls. Strangely enough, you're going to go into ship controls, because in ship controls, as you go down, you will see this miscellaneous. And so you're going to go to miscellaneous, and before anything else, you're going to scroll down until you find the reset HMD orientation. This is vital, because when you're in VR, if things aren't straight ahead the way they should be, you want to be able to press a button on your joystick or whatever it is, your hand controller, to get you oriented correctly. Now, I want to say this. What I do in VR, so I don't have to take the headset off or worry about keyboard commands or anything of that sort, I use a HOTAS flight throttle and joystick to fly the ship. I then use the hand controllers to do other things like the camera suite, the free cam. When I get into a system for exploration and I'm going to be using my sensors, I'll have a lot of that on the hand controllers. They're already set up that way, because once you put it in the VR mode, the hand controllers are doing a lot of that. And then on foot, I'm going to be using the Xbox controller. So I'm actually sitting there with most of everything I'm doing would be flying in the ship with the joystick and throttle, and then move over when I got free time to do camera or sensors. And also when I'm in the SRV, that's already been set up with the hand controllers when you put it in the VR mode. When, even though you're going to set it to custom, I actually drive around the SRV with hand controllers. It kind of mentally makes you feel like you're using a different vehicle. And then when I'm on foot, once again the Xbox controller. Just so you're not confused, I am using a PC, obviously, for VR, not an Xbox, but I have the Xbox controller on the PC for those things. All right, back to it. We got this reset HMD orientation taken care of, and that done up front, and so everything should be rock solid in front of you now. And so you want to hit apply. But before we move on, another thing in miscellaneous, since it's just a couple down, you'll see landing gear. Landing gear is one of those things that's vital to basic flying. So, I could talk about all these other things here, but for basic flying, you should have the landing gear mapped to your joystick. I use one of the big fat buttons on my joystick, not one of the triggers, but one of the big fat, like on my joystick it says eject. I use that for landing gear, but that's just me. You can use whatever works for you. And while you're here, I probably would wait till later, but eventually you can, if you have a bunch of little buttons. I have a row of little tiny buttons of 4 buttons, and then on top of that another 4 buttons on my joystick. You could set those to these divert power to engines and to weapons and systems, and if nothing else, you may just set the one for balanced power distribution for the time being. Later on you can get more into buttons, but right now we're just talking about general flying. So that's it for the miscellaneous. And so the next thing, if you got those done, we want to go back up and look for mode switches. Oh, actually that's here. Mode switches is right below miscellaneous. Go to mode switches. This is the next important thing. I put out with the Elite Dangerous Horizons another video on doing the same things I'm talking about now in VR, but I did it in VR, so it's a little choppy because of my head moving around, and so you could go watch that if you wanted to, but hopefully this will clarify things. The important thing here is you're going to scroll down to looking at, and this is the key thing for VR, is you want to scroll down to looking at external power and set it to does nothing, and looking at internal panel and set it to does nothing. So what happens now is when you're in the cockpit and you're moving your head around, you don't have those panels jumping up and closing out and jumping back up and closing out again. You could do it with the comms and the roll panel. That's the comms is the one that's up above on the left, and the roll panel is when you look down in your lap, the different rolls come up. The external power panel, that's the one that comes up to your left shoulder, that tells you everything like navigation and stuff and what's going on with communications outside the ship. And then the internal panel is on the right shoulder. That one will come up and talk about all the things about your ship, your fire groups, your modules, and that kind of thing. So you want to set those that does nothing. What that means is you do want to be able to direct those, so you're going to come up to here and key bind external power panel. That way you can hit a key, a button on the joystick or the throttle, and it will pull up that panel, and you can hit it again and it will turn it off. And you want to bind it again to the internal panel. Later on, if you want to do key bindings for the other things, I would wait till later, because you may run out of buttons on your throttles and your joystick before you know it. Don't pay much attention to what you see on the screen, because I am not in VR mode right now. I'm in your standard PC monitor mode, and it's got different key bindings for that. But I'm just for ease of viewing going on to the next thing, and that would be the flight throttle. You want to set that up for pitch, rock, and roll. So we're going to get out of mode switches and look for flight rotation. And actually this one here, you want to play with this so it binds to your joystick. So fool with this. I'm not going to tell you which ones to do. Maybe I can get into the VR mode later and show you the screen in VR and show you how I have mine binded, but I don't remember. But I think it's as simple as the yaw axis, the roll axis, and the pitch axis, where you don't have to bind the left and right. You just bind the axis, and you'll be all set up for your joystick to change the attitude of your ship. And then the next part would be flight thrusts. So flight thrust is a little different. Instead of pitch, rock, and roll, you want to be able to slide to the left and slide to the right and go up and down. And that's with the lateral thrust. So you want to, what I do for this, you can do whatever you want for your buttons, but I use the hat switch, or it would be known as the POV. And then that's a little rocker thing by your top, by your top trigger. I got a finger trigger and a thumb trigger on the top of the joystick, but then you have the rocker, which everybody calls I call it the hat switch. I think everybody does, but it's the POV, and I rock that around, and by doing that, I get lateral. I set it to lateral thrust axis, and you may have to play with it and make it left, right, and then forward and backward. Now, I don't use that because you can only rock forward, backward, left, and right. This is vital for when you are coming and landing on a landing pad, but or even on a planet. You want to thrust around to find a nice flat area. But up and down, I put that, instead of on the joystick, I put that on my throttle. My HOTAS throttle has a big fat rocker switch that I hit the right. I rock it to the right to go up, and I rock it to the left to thrust down. And I love that. I mean, if you haven't used that, that's a tip. I really like using that rocker to thrust up and down. It's really neat, and it's been wonderful. And so that takes care of most of the motion so far for moving around in VR. Then the next thing would be flight miscellaneous engine boost. So this is interesting because I like to toggle the flight assist on and off, but you may want to wait until you get all the other basic buttons done first and come back later. And if you still have free buttons on your joystick, then you can assign one to this. But you'll need to assign engine boost to a button and toggle frame shift drive to a button. Super cruise and hyper jump, you really don't need to do those, because once you toggle frame shift drive, it'll go into super cruise unless you're targeting something that's light years away, and then it'll automatically go into hyper jump. But either way, you just need to do the one, and you're all set. Targeting. Let's move on down to targeting. So, like I said, there's a lot of buttons for you to map it. You don't need to worry about mapping them now at the beginning. These are the ones that will set you up for most of what, 90% of what you're going to do flying. Targeting, you want to select target ahead. So find a button to select target ahead. That's an important one. And then if you end up being where the basic thing you do is fighting, and you're going to end up mapping all these later, but I wouldn't do that now. I'm just talking about basic flight, not fighting. Because once you get your basic flight, you then come back and set up these buttons for fighting. The other thing that is vital is the very last one on the list, target next system en route. You definitely want to set a button for that and get accustomed to that button. That way, if you have a route where you're going to, you're jumping to 5, 6, 10, who knows how many different star systems, but along the way you want to stop and refuel at a station or do something, you can target something else, go there, and then when you're all done doing whatever it is you can do or checking out a planet, then you can hit this button and it will put you back on your route and you can head back off again. So that's definitely a button you want to do. Okay, the next thing down is weapons. So obviously, just about all of these you want to take care of. The primary fire, that's simple. You're gonna, your primary fire trigger, and then your secondary fire trigger. Deploy hard points, and also you're gonna want to set firing deploys hard points to on. That makes it a little easier when you're in VR. You can wait till later to do the cycle to next. Cycle to the next fire group. I had set those buttons and then found I wasn't really using them that much. But maybe you would. But you don't need to do that right off the get-go. You do use the primary fire and secondary fire buttons for other things other than just firing weapons. So make sure you get that down. Okay, so we're gonna hit apply, of course, and then you're gonna get out. I'm canceling because I'm not wanting to change anything, and then we're gonna go into general controls. This is where you want to go into interface mode and find the UI panel select. Now, one of the things about VR is how do you go about managing your way through the panels? So the way I do it is I use the hat switch, the POV, to navigate up and down the panel. And then when I'm ready to make a selection, I'll hit whatever button I set here on my throttle to select that particular item, and that's how I select it. And then also you want to find the one that says next panel tab. You definitely need a button for that, because when you open up your panels, there's going to be a series of pads up there, and if you want to move to the next pad, you're going to need a button to move over to the next pad. Then you can use, like I do, your POV, your hat switch, to go up and down that panel, and then hit the select button to select whatever item you want. That's made navigating these menus in the game, in the the panel menus. Really nice, and after a while, very a no-brainer where you don't even think about it. You're just moving along. Now, I didn't mention this up front. I wanted to mention this up front that a lot of people have told me, you can use voice attack. That's an external party program that you can use in not just Elite Dangerous, but a lot of different games. And you can set up voice attack to bind to whatever key bindings you want. And yeah, go ahead and do that if you want to do that. But you probably, even if you do that, you want the backup of having your button set up for flying the ship, just in case you need to not wake the baby, or you're pretending like you're doing homework and you don't want to be screaming at the computer. Nevertheless, I'm not using voice attack. I think one day I should probably experience that, but just so you know, I'm talking about setting this up outside of voice attack, and voice attack is another option. Now, a free camera suite. This is where we get into how important it is to set this up. I use for the ship, to toggle the free camera suite, I have a particular button I use on the joystick to take me into the camera suite. That puts you into an external camera view, which you can move around, and it's really, if you set it up for VR and it's set up your controllers, I use the controllers to move the camera all around in the camera suite. If I want to unbind the camera and go free cam, then you have another button to toggle the free cam on and off. But that's also automatically set up in the VR mode for the controllers. So just figure out what that is. So basically, though, back to the camera suite, you set up a particular button to toggle on and off the ship camera suite, and then I use the same exact button for the commander toggle camera suite. This is the thing that nobody's talked about. Everybody else is saying you got to press a couple buttons or do, some kind of tricky thing where you press the free cam and the camera suite button at the same time. That may have been the case a few weeks ago, but I can tell you right now that with the latest update, that all I did was set the commander toggle camera suite to a particular button on my joystick, and when I hit that, I'm in VR mode on the foot, when I'm on foot. So it's in third person view, it's not in first person view. So I just want to talk about that for a minute or two. But before I do, that is basically everything you need to get you set up and going. If you bind all these things, get in the game, and start fooling with it, then little by little, don't try to do it all in one day. Little by little, add buttons, or make sure that the buttons that you set are all working the way you thought they were supposed to be working. And I told you the truth, and they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. But that's it. That's how I set up. You're going to hit apply, and then in my case, I'm canceling out because I don't want to change anything. Okay, so my thoughts about all the kind of information, and I find that it's either misinformation or I'm misinformed or whatever. The first bit of misinformation was the reaction to Elite Dangerous Odyssey when it first came out was such a disappointment that people were just bashing it in every which way and talking about how there wasn't VR support and they weren't even going to be VR support. I don't think any of that was ever true. You could, from the get-go, you would be able to do VR in Odyssey just like you did in Horizons. When I say just like, everything you did in Horizons, you can do in Odyssey in VR. What you couldn't do in VR initially was go on foot. Now, I don't know. I didn't have the initial package. I didn't get it to July 8th, which I think is update 5. But I can tell you, you can go in VR on foot in third-person view. simply pressing the camera suite button. You don't have to press multiple buttons or stand on your head or do any tricky things, which was, if you actually do a search for Odyssey and VR, I think almost all the videos are going to be telling you the same little trick that is unnecessary. But yeah, so back to the on foot. When you go and disembark from your ship and you're on foot, you will be in a first-person view with a HUD in front of you and a gray box around it, a gray rectangle, and it looks like a movie screen. And so, everybody, I've looked at, I don't know, half a dozen, probably a dozen videos where they all said, it sucks, there's no VR, you're in this two-dimensional TV screen mode when you're in first-person view. First of all, I don't believe that's true at all. And that's because when I'm in it, it doesn't look any different than 3D. So let's talk about that for a minute. What is VR? When I say VR, I'm talking about being in a three-dimensional world rather than a two-dimensional world on a monitor screen looking at three-dimensional ships that are modeled in 3 dimensions, but you're looking at it on a 2-dimensional computer screen. When you're in VR, you're actually not, your two eyeballs aren't looking at one screen. Each eye has got its own screen. And by doing that, the magic of VR is each image is set off in order to give you the 3-dimensional view. So when I go into first-person view in Odyssey, even though I got tunnel vision with the gray box around, with the HUD up, it's still 3D. It's not 2D. Everybody says it's 2D. I think it's 3D. It looks 3D to me. It's only that I got tunnel vision. This is similar to real life for me when I go scuba diving. I do this quite a bit. I put on a face mask. I don't go into 2 dimensions, but I'm tunnel vision with the scuba mask. Life around me is still 3D. It's still life around me. So I'm looking at it and thinking, we're still in 3D. And all they have to do to get us into full virtual reality mode, in a sense, is take the gray box away. And this is why I don't think they will. What happens is when you're in first-person view, you move your head with your VR, your actual head, and your head will turn into the tunnel box, and you'll be looking at a gray box, more gray box than you are actually looking at the screen. So what that does is it makes you keep your head straight so you don't move your head around. And the way you move your head around is not by moving your actual head, but using the Xbox controllers to move back, forward, and move your head and turn this way. So you have to use the Xbox controller to move around. But you're still going to be in 3D. You may disagree with me on that, but you're still going to be in 3D. But you're going to have to move your head, not in real life, but with the controller. Does that suck? Yeah, it does. But so what happens, though, is you are free to go into the camera suite, push that button. No tricks about it. Just push the camera suite button. You will go into third-person view. You will see your own body. And then you can use, in my case, it's on my controller. I can flip around to different views, just like you did in the ship. When you go in the camera suite, if you don't go into free cam, you flip the thumb thing around, and you go into different perspectives of the external ship, and then finally internal to the ship. When you're on foot, you can do the same thing. You go into the camera suite, and then you flip to different perspectives until you get the third-person view perspective you want. Either, I don't like the one that's right behind them, because you're kind of like a short guy right behind and you can't see over his shoulder. I like the one over the right shoulder or the left shoulder. I hadn't figured out, and there may be somebody can tell me how to do it, where you can actually go right into almost a first-person view. The trouble is, when you're in this mode with the camera suite, you don't have the HUD, but you have full VR, and you still can pick up your hand controller and walk around even while you're in third-person view. So it's not like you're in free cam and you're sliding around. You actually can walk around with your hand controller just like you would when you're in the HUD. So it's kind of interesting. You can disembark from your ship at any station and then go into third-person view, run or walk over to the elevators. You may find when you go over to the elevators, you get out of range. I don't really know what that means, but what it means in practice is all of a sudden it goes black. So when that happens, just push the camera suite button and you go into the HUD mode, and then you can work your way to the elevator. When you get off the elevator, you can actually walk around the station in third-person view, just looking over your shoulder, and you're walking around just like everything, and everything is in VR. I mean, everything is in 3D. So when you're ready to interact, you have to press the
Do you mind?
Camera suite button to go back into the HUD, and then you can interact. So that is the limitation, and that's what kind of sucks. But that's the workaround, and it allows you actually to get out on planets on foot and look at the beauty of it in 3D. That's what's really wonderful. Now, I don't have a lot of hours with Elite Dangerous Odyssey. In fact, I only have probably 2, because I got it yesterday. I downloaded it. I played for a couple of hours, but I only really spent my time trying to figure out how this stuff worked for VR and how to bypass all the misinformation that was given so far. And I don't blame anything about that, because all that stuff that's been proposed, previously, as far as the VR goes, could have been in the earlier updates, but now at I think it's update 5 I have. Everything I just told you is the case, and I can only see things getting better. And there may be a way for me to do this in first-person view by zooming in or something. I hadn't tried that yet. But if anybody knows those things, please comment below. Hopefully this was helpful for those of you who want to experience Odyssey in VR and even experience more of it on foot in VR, and understanding the limitation that if you do interactions, you'll have to go into the HUD mode, and once you're in the HUD mode, try to keep your head straight. That kind of sucks, but otherwise your VR headset is going to go into the gray. But if you keep it straight, you can move your head around using the controller. So once again, I use the 3 different types of controllers for flying the ship. I use the throttle and joystick for camera and scanning, and on foot. For camera and for scanning and that kind of thing. And in the SRV, I use the hand controllers, the VR hand controllers, rather than the throttle and joystick. And then finally, for on foot, I use the camera suite button on the joystick, but I'm going to be using the hand controller. And I suppose you can set up the button by going back into general controls. I hadn't thought about this until I was just talking about it, and go into camera suite and go into commander toggle and maybe put that on the hand controller instead of the joystick, and then you're using a hand controller to go in and out of third person to first person view with the HUD. Anyway, hopefully any of that helps. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.